My sister blocked the entrance to my own luxury hotel, laughing, "This place is too expensive for failures like you." My mother joined her, whispering, "Don't embarrass the family by pretending you belong here." They had no idea I owned the entire building and everything inside it. When my security chief approached the door and said, "Good evening, Ms. Johnson, shall I have these individuals escorted from your property?" Their laughter died instantly. I never thought I'd be posting one of those dramatic revenge stories you see all over Reddit, but here I am at 2 a.m., still buzzing from what happened tonight. I'm Isabel Johnson, and I need to get this off my chest because honestly, I'm still processing everything that went down. To give you some background, my family has always treated me like the black sheep. My sister Nora has been the golden child since we were kids. She married her college boyfriend David right after graduation, had 2 perfect kids, and settled into what my mother calls respectable suburban life. Meanwhile, I took what everyone considered the risky path. Instead of getting married and having babies like Nora, I threw myself into business. After college, I started small with a food truck in downtown Seattle. My family thought it was embarrassing. "When are you going to get a real job?" My mother would ask every family gathering. Nora's doing so well with her teaching career. What they didn't know was that my little food truck was just the beginning. I reinvested every penny, bought a second truck, then a third. Within 3 years, I had a fleet of 12 food trucks operating across the Seattle metropolitan area, specializing in gourmet fusion cuisine that was drawing lines around the block. But that wasn't enough for me. I'd always been fascinated by real estate, and I started buying small properties, rundown buildings that I could renovate and flip. My family saw me wearing work clothes, getting my hands dirty, and assumed I was barely scraping by. Nora would make snide comments about my phase and how I needed to settle down and find stability like normal people. What they didn't see was my bank account growing. What they didn't know was that I was networking with some of the biggest names in hospitality and real estate development. By age 29, I had sold my food truck business for $2.4 million and was deep into commercial real estate development. The thing about my family is they never asked about my work beyond surface-level judgment. When I'd show up to family dinners in my work clothes, sometimes paint-stained jeans because I'd been overseeing renovations, they'd exchange these knowing looks. Poor Isabel, still playing around with her little projects while Nora has a mortgage and a 401k. I remember one particularly painful Thanksgiving dinner 3 years ago. I had just closed on a strip mall renovation project that would net me close to $2 million in profit, and I was exhausted but exhilarated. I'd been working 18-hour days for weeks, coordinating contractors, dealing with city permits, and managing a dozen different moving parts. When I walked into my mother's house, still in my work boots because I'd come straight from the construction site, Nora took one look at me and shook her head. "Isabel, you look terrible," she announced to the entire room. "When was the last time you had a real vacation? Or a real date, for that matter?" My mother chimed in from the kitchen. "She's been saying she's too busy with work, but I keep telling her, what kind of work keeps you looking like a construction worker all the time?" "The kind that's making me financially independent," I wanted to say, but I knew they wouldn't believe me. Instead, I just smiled and asked if I could help with dinner. "Actually, yes," Nora said, following me into the kitchen. "You can help by explaining to me what you're actually doing with your life. David and I are worried about you." David, Nora's husband, is a perfectly nice guy who works in insurance and has never taken a risk bigger than switching from whole life to term life insurance. He's stable, predictable, and exactly what my mother thinks I should want in a partner. "I'm building a business," I said simply, washing my hands at the kitchen sink. "What kind of business?" Nora pressed. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're just bouncing from one random project to another. Food trucks, then house flipping, now whatever this construction thing is. That's not building a business, Isabel. That's having a hobby." My mother handed me potatoes to peel. "Your sister has a point, honey. Nora has a career plan. She knows where she'll be in 5 years, 10 years. You seem to just wing it from month to month." What they didn't understand was that everything I was doing was connected. The food trucks taught me customer service, cash flow management, and how to scale operations quickly. House flipping taught me construction, renovation, and how to see potential where others saw problems. The commercial real estate projects were teaching me about larger scale development, zoning laws, and how to work with city officials and contractors on major projects. But every time I tried to explain this progression, they'd look at me like I was making excuses for not having a real career path. "I just think you need to be more realistic about your future," Nora continued that Thanksgiving. "You're 28, Isabel. Most people our age are thinking about settling down, buying houses, starting families. You're still acting like you're 22 and fresh out of college." "I'm buying houses," I said quietly. "Just not to live in." Nora laughed. "That little house you flipped last year? Isabel, that's not the same thing as having a mortgage and building equity. That's just gambling with real estate. Actually, I made $340,000 profit on that house, I said, finally losing my patience. And I've closed on 6 more properties since then. The kitchen went quiet. My mother stopped stirring the gravy. Nora stared at me. 300,000? My mother asked slowly. 340,000. After taxes, contractors, and all expenses. Nora shook her head. That's impossible, Isabel. Houses in our area don't sell for that kind of profit margin. They do if you know what you're doing. But you always look like you're barely getting by. Your car is 10 years old. You wear the same clothes all the time. You live in that tiny apartment. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and realized that she genuinely couldn't compute what I was telling her. In her mind, successful people looked a certain way, lived a certain way, and since I didn't fit that image, I couldn't possibly be successful. I drive a 10-year-old car because it's paid off and reliable, I explained patiently. I wear work clothes because I work on construction sites. I live in a small apartment because I'm reinvesting my profits instead of spending them on lifestyle inflation. But what's the point? Nora asked, genuinely confused. What's the point of making all this money if you don't spend it on anything? The point is building something bigger. The point is financial independence. The point is creating wealth, not just income. My mother set down her spoon. Isabel, honey, are you saying you actually have substantial savings? I'm saying I have substantial investments. Properties, business equity, development projects. I'm not wealthy yet, but I'm building wealth. Nora sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Why didn't you ever tell us this? I tried to. Every time I'd mention a project or a deal, you'd change the subject or make comments about me needing to get serious about my life. But we thought you were struggling. We thought you were barely making ends meet. Why would you think that? Because you never buy anything nice for yourself. You never go on fancy vacations. You don't have any of the things that successful people have. And there it was, the fundamental disconnect between us. To them, success meant consumption. It meant having the visible markers of prosperity, the new car, the bigger house, the designer clothes, the expensive dinners out. They couldn't understand that I was choosing to live below my means so I could invest above my means. That conversation should have been a turning point, but it wasn't. By the time dessert was served, Nora had convinced herself that even if I was making good money on these projects, it wasn't sustainable. Real estate is cyclical, Isabel. What goes up comes down. You need something stable, something consistent. My mother agreed. It's wonderful that you've had some success with these projects, but you can't build a life on windfalls and speculation. You need steady income, benefits, security. The irony was that I was building toward exactly those things, just not in the way they recognized. Every property I bought and renovated increased my net worth and my passive income potential. Every successful project enhanced my reputation and opened doors to bigger opportunities. I was creating my own security, my own stability, my own benefits package. But because it didn't look like Nora's version of success, the teaching job with a pension plan, the suburban house with a white picket fence, the minivan and the soccer practice schedule, they couldn't see it as valid. That's when I decided to stop trying to convince them. If they wanted to believe I was an irresponsible dreamer wasting my potential, fine. I'd prove them wrong through actions, not words. I'd build something so undeniably successful that they'd have no choice but to acknowledge it. 4 years ago, I made the biggest purchase of my life. The Grandview Hotel had been a landmark in our city for decades, but it had fallen into disrepair. The original owners were elderly and couldn't afford the renovations it needed. I bought the entire building for $8 million. Not just invested in it, I bought it outright, with plans to restore it to its former glory and beyond. The renovation took 2.5 years. I lived and breathed that project, working with architects, interior designers, and craftsmen to create something extraordinary. The Grandview became a 42-room luxury boutique hotel with a 5-star restaurant, a rooftop bar, and a spa that's already being featured in travel magazines. Every detail was carefully chosen, from the Italian marble in the lobby to the custom-made furniture in each suite. The process wasn't easy. There were days when I questioned everything, when the city planning department rejected our initial designs, when the main contractor walked off the job halfway through, when we discovered the building's electrical system needed to be completely replaced at a cost of $800,000. I remember calling my business mentor at 2 a.m, crying in my car outside the construction site, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Every major project has moments like this, he told me. The difference between successful developers and failed ones isn't whether you hit obstacles, it's whether you find ways around them. So I found ways around them. I hired a new contractor. I worked with the city to redesign the plans. I took out a larger construction loan to cover the electrical work. I learned to read blueprints, to understand building codes, to negotiate with suppliers and subcontractors. There were weeks when I slept in a trailer on the construction site because I needed to be available for early morning deliveries or late night emergency repairs. My family didn't see any of this. When I'd show up to birthday parties or holiday dinners exhausted and covered in dust, they'd make their usual comments about me needing to find some direction or think about my future. When I'd mention that I couldn't make it to some family event because I had to deal with a construction issue, Nora would roll her eyes and mutter something about me and my projects. The worst part was when things got really difficult financially during the renovation. There was a 3-month period when everything seemed to go wrong at once. The marble shipment from Italy was damaged in transit, the kitchen equipment we'd ordered was recalled for safety issues, and the rooftop deck construction ran into structural problems that required additional engineering work. Each setback cost money we hadn't budgeted for. I had to take out additional loans, liquidate some of my other investments, and postpone paying myself any salary for 6 months. I was living on credit cards and ramen noodles, but I knew it was temporary. I knew that if I could just get the hotel open, everything would change. But my family didn't know any of this context. They just saw me looking stressed and wearing the same clothes for weeks at a time. At Nora's birthday party that year, my mother pulled me aside and offered to lend me money. "Honey, I can see you're struggling," she said quietly. "Your father and I have some savings. We could help you get back on your feet, maybe help you find a stable job." I was so frustrated I almost told her everything right then. I almost explained that I wasn't struggling, I was investing. That I wasn't poor, I was building something that would make me wealthy. That I didn't need a stable job because I was creating my own stability. But I didn't. Because I knew she wouldn't understand, and I was tired of trying to convince people who didn't want to be convinced. "I'm fine, Mom," I said instead. "Just working hard on something important." She sighed and patted my arm. "I just wish you'd think about your future, Isabel. You're not getting any younger, and these schemes of yours, well, they're not really building toward anything substantial." If only she knew that the scheme I was working on would be worth $12 million within 2 years. The hotel finally opened 18 months ago, and it was everything I dreamed it could be. The opening night party was covered by the city's lifestyle magazine. The restaurant got a rave review in the newspaper within the first month. The rooftop bar became the place to be for the city's social scene. We were booked solid from day one. But even then, my family didn't really understand what I'd accomplished. I invited them to the opening party, of course. Nora and David came, along with my mother and a few other relatives. They were impressed by the party, by the beautiful space, by the obvious success of the event. "This is amazing, Isabel," Nora said, sipping champagne in the lobby. "Did you help plan this event? Are you working for the hotel now?" "Something like that," I said, not ready to have a full conversation in the middle of a crowded party. My mother was charmed by the hotel's elegance. "What a beautiful place," she kept saying. "You must have such interesting clients, working on events like this." They assumed I was an event planner or maybe a consultant who had been hired to help with the opening. It never occurred to them that I might actually own the place. Why would it? In their minds, I was still the same Isabel who couldn't afford to eat at restaurants like this, let alone own one. I let them think whatever they wanted to think. I was exhausted from 2.5 years of construction stress, and I just wanted to enjoy the success without having to explain or justify it to anyone. Besides, I was already thinking about the next project. The hotel was successful, but it was just the beginning. I wanted to build a portfolio of luxury properties, maybe expand into other cities, create a brand that would be recognized nationally. But first, I wanted to just enjoy what I built. I wanted to walk through my lobby every morning and feel proud of what I created. I wanted to see guests checking in and know that I provided them with an extraordinary experience. I wanted to watch the sunrise from my penthouse apartment and feel grateful for every risk I'd taken to get there. The hotel opened 6 months ago, and it's been booked solid ever since. We charge $800 to $1,200 per night for our standard rooms, and our penthouse suite goes for $3,500. The restaurant has a 3-week waiting list for dinner reservations. The spa is booked out 2 months in advance. In 6 months, we've already turned a profit and been featured in Architectural Digest and Condé Nast Traveler. The success has been beyond what I even dared to hope for. We're averaging 95% occupancy, which is exceptional for any hotel in the Seattle market. The restaurant is already being considered for a James Beard Award nomination. The spa treatments are so popular that we're having to turn away non-hotel guests who want appointments. More importantly, the hotel has become profitable ahead of schedule. My business plan projected that we'd break even by month 18 and show a profit by month 24. Instead, we were cash flow positive by month 6 and showing a substantial profit by month 10. The revenue numbers are exceeding my most optimistic projections by 25%. This success has opened doors I never expected. I've been invited to speak at hospitality industry conferences. Interior design magazines want to feature the hotel in their pages. Travel bloggers and influencers are requesting complimentary stays in exchange for social media coverage. The Seattle Tourism Board has asked me to serve on their advisory committee. But the most satisfying part has been proving to myself that I could do this. Every time I walk through the lobby and see guests enjoying the space I created, every time I review the financial reports and see the healthy profit margins, every time I get a 5-star review praising the service and attention to detail, I'm reminded that I was right to take this enormous risk. The hotel has also become a source of pride for the community. The building had been empty for years before I bought it, an eyesore in the downtown district. Now it's a destination, bringing visitors and money into the area. Local businesses have told me that their foot traffic has increased since we opened. The mayor mentioned the hotel's success in her State of the City address. But here's the thing, I never told my family any of this. Not because I was trying to be secretive, but because they'd made it clear over the years that they weren't interested in the details of my work. When they asked what I was doing, I'd say working on a hotel project, and they'd nod dismissively and change the subject to Nora's kids or her husband's promotion at the insurance company. In their defense, I suppose working on a hotel project could mean anything from being a housekeeper to being a consultant to being an investor. But I'd learned not to elaborate because every time I tried to share details about my work in the past, they'd respond with advice about how I needed to be more practical or more conventional. So when my mother would ask how work was going, I'd say good and leave it at that. When Nora would make comments about me needing to think about my future, I'd just smile and nod. When they'd suggest I should consider going back to school or finding a job with benefits, I'd thank them for their concern and change the subject. It was easier than trying to explain that I was building something bigger than they could imagine. It was easier than dealing with their skepticism and their well-meaning but misguided advice. It was easier than watching them exchange those looks that said poor Isabel, still playing around with her little schemes. The irony is that by this point, I was probably making more money than the rest of my family combined. The hotel's monthly profit was more than Nora's annual teaching salary. My net worth had grown to a level that would have shocked them. I could afford to take the vacations they were always suggesting I needed, buy the nice clothes they thought I should wear, live in the luxury apartment they thought I should want. But I didn't want those things, at least not yet. I wanted to reinvest the profits, to build the business, to expand the brand. I wanted to prove that this success wasn't a fluke, that I could replicate it in other markets. I wanted to build something lasting, something that would secure my financial future for decades to come. My mother, Patricia, has always been Nora's biggest cheerleader and my biggest critic. She's never missed an opportunity to point out how I'm 31 and still single, how I don't have the stability that Nora has, how my lifestyle is unsustainable. At last Christmas, she actually said, "I just worry about your future, Isabel. You can't live like a college student forever." I've tried to maintain a relationship with them despite this, but it's been exhausting. Every family gathering becomes an opportunity for them to make comments about my choices. Nora particularly enjoys making digs about money. "Must be nice not having any real responsibilities," she'll say when I mention traveling for business. Some of us have mortgages and kids to think about. What made tonight so perfect, and so satisfying, was that it was completely unplanned. I had a business dinner at the hotel with potential investors from New York. We were discussing expanding the concept to other cities, possibly franchising the brand. It was a big deal, the kind of meeting that could set up the next decade of my career. I dressed carefully, a black Armani suit, my grandmother's pearl necklace, and the Louboutin heels I'd bought to celebrate the hotel's opening. The meeting went incredibly well. The investors were impressed with everything, the occupancy rates, the revenue numbers, the press coverage. We talked numbers that would have blown my family's minds. They want to back 3 more hotels in different markets, with me maintaining creative control and a significant ownership stake. We were talking about a deal worth $35 million over the next 5 years. I was on cloud 9 as I walked them to the lobby after dinner. We were still discussing details when I heard a familiar laugh from near the entrance. My stomach dropped as I recognized the sound. Nora and my mother were standing just inside the lobby, looking around with expressions I knew all too well. That mixture of judgment and superiority they got when they encountered something they considered pretentious or over the top. "Would you look at this place?" Nora was saying loudly to our mother. "I bet they charge $50 for a hamburger." "Ridiculous," my mother agreed. "Who has money to waste like this? It's so gaudy." I tried to quietly wrap up my conversation with the investors, hoping to get them out the door before my family noticed me. But Nora has always had a sixth sense for causing me maximum embarrassment. "Isabel?" she called out, her voice carrying across the marble lobby. "What are you doing here?" The investors looked at me curiously as Nora and my mother approached our group. I could see Nora taking in my outfit, the expensive surroundings, and drawing her own conclusions. I was just having a business dinner, I said carefully. Nora laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. A business dinner? Here? Isabel, this place probably costs more per night than you make in a month. My mother joined in, her voice carrying that tone of fake concern she uses when she wants to embarrass me publicly. Honey, I hope you're not trying to impress people by pretending you belong somewhere like this. You know you can't afford this lifestyle. The investors were watching this exchange with obvious discomfort. I could feel my face burning with humiliation, but I tried to keep my voice level. Actually, I should introduce you to my family, I said to the investors. This is my mother, Patricia, and my sister, Nora. Oh, how lovely, one of the investors said politely. Isabel's been telling us about her incredible vision for hospitality development. Nora snorted. Vision? Isabel's got plenty of those. Remember when she was going to revolutionize food trucks? Now she's playing dress up in fancy hotels. Nora, I said quietly, maybe we could talk about this later. But she was on a roll now, the way she always got when she had an audience. I'm sorry, she said to the investors, but I have to ask, you know she doesn't actually belong here, right? Isabel likes to pretend she's some big businesswoman, but she's basically been unemployed for the past few years, playing around with little side projects. My mother nodded sympathetically. We worry about her. She's never had a stable job or a real career. She just moves from one scheme to another. I wanted to disappear. These investors had just offered to back a $40 million expansion, and my family was systematically destroying my credibility right in front of them. I think there might be some confusion, one of the investors started to say, but Nora cut him off. No confusion, she said firmly. I know my sister. She's always been a dreamer, never realistic about money or business. Trust me, whatever she's told you about her experience, you should take it with a grain of salt. The investors exchanged glances, and I could see doubt creeping into their expressions. This was my worst nightmare playing out in real time. You know what, Nora continued, clearly enjoying herself, I bet she brought you here to try to impress you, spending money she doesn't have on dinner at some overpriced restaurant. That's so typical Isabel, all show, no substance. The restaurant here is supposed to be incredible, my mother added, but honestly, who can afford to eat at places like this regularly? It's just wasteful. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Nora wasn't done. Isabel, seriously, you need to stop this. It's embarrassing for the whole family when you pretend to be something you're not. You're 31 years old, when are you going to get a real job and settle down like a normal person? That's when something inside me snapped. I'd spent years listening to this, years of having my accomplishments dismissed and my choices mocked. But doing it in front of investors, potentially destroying a deal that represented years of work, that crossed a line. You're right, I said quietly. We should probably take this conversation outside. Why? Nora asked. Are you embarrassed to have your business associates see the real you? No, I said, my voice still calm. I'm embarrassed to have the staff see me arguing with guests who are causing a disturbance in my lobby. Nora laughed like I'd made a joke. Your lobby? Isabel, come on. You can't just... She stopped mid-sentence as Marcus Chen, my head of security, approached our group. Marcus is a former Navy SEAL who runs our security team with military precision. He's intimidating under the best circumstances, and right now he looked confused about why I was being confronted by agitated guests in my own hotel. Good evening, Ms. Johnson, he said formally. Is everything all right? I couldn't help but notice there seemed to be some kind of disturbance. The silence that followed was deafening. Nora's mouth actually fell open. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. Everything's fine, Marcus, I said calmly. Just a family misunderstanding. Shall I have these individuals escorted from your property? He asked, his tone professional but with just enough edge to make it clear he was serious. Nora found her voice first. Ms. Johnson? Your property? Isabel, what is he talking about? I looked at my family, really looked at them, and felt something shift inside me. Years of condescension, years of being treated like the family failure, years of having my accomplishments dismissed and my dreams mocked. And now they'd potentially sabotaged the biggest business deal of my career. Marcus, I said, could you please explain to these ladies who I am? Marcus straightened to his full 6'3" height. This is Isabel Johnson, owner and CEO of Grandview Hospitality Group. She owns this hotel and the entire building. The color drained from Nora's face. My mother actually swayed on her feet. That's impossible, Nora whispered. Isabel, you can't. You don't. I bought this building 3 years ago for $8 million, I said, my voice steady and clear. I spent the next 2.5 years renovating it into what you see now. We opened 6 months ago, and we're currently running at 97% occupancy with a 3-week waiting list for restaurant reservations. I turned to the investors, who were watching this unfold with fascination rather than concern now. Gentlemen, I apologize for this interruption. These are indeed my mother and sister, and they've apparently been operating under some misunderstandings about my career. No misunderstandings here, one of the investors said with obvious amusement. We've seen your financials, Isabel. Very impressive operation you've built. Nora was shaking her head like she could make this all go away. But you always look like you've been working construction. You wear old clothes and you're always covered in paint or dust or... Because I've been overseeing renovations, I said patiently. Because I'm hands-on with my properties. Because I don't sit in an office all day, I'm actually on site making sure everything meets my standards. My mother finally found her voice. Isabel, why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think? Think what, Mom? That I was a failure? You never asked about the details of my work. When I said I was working on a hotel project, you'd nod and change the subject. When I mentioned real estate development, you'd make comments about how I needed to get serious about my life. But we didn't know, Nora said weakly. You didn't want to know, I corrected. There's a difference. Every time I tried to share what I was doing, you'd interrupt with advice about how I needed to be more like you. How I needed stability and a conventional job and a husband and kids. The investors were exchanging glances again, but this time it wasn't doubt, it was impressed recognition of exactly the kind of determination and business acumen they were looking to back. Isabel, my mother said, I'm so sorry. We had no idea. You had no idea because you never bothered to find out, I said. You were so convinced that your way of life was the only valid way that you never considered I might be successful on my own terms. Nora was staring around the lobby with new eyes, taking in the crystal chandeliers, the marble floors, the fresh orchids on every surface. You really own all of this? I own this building, yes. I also own 2 other commercial properties downtown, and as of tonight, I'm potentially expanding into 3 new markets with the backing of these investors. One of the investors stepped forward. Ms. Johnson, should we reschedule our discussion for tomorrow? We understand this is a family matter. Actually, I said, I think we can wrap up tonight. Marcus, could you prepare the conference room? We have some contracts to review. As Marcus nodded and headed toward the elevators, I turned back to my family. You're welcome to stay for a drink at the bar, I said politely. The first round is on the house. But I do have business to finish. Nora grabbed my arm as I started to follow the investors. Isabel, wait. We. This is incredible. I'm so proud of you. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back up at her face. Are you proud of me, Nora? Or are you proud that I turned out to be successful in a way you can finally understand and respect? She didn't have an answer for that. The thing is, I continued, I've been doing work I'm proud of for years. I built a successful food truck business from nothing. I learned real estate development from the ground up. I've been growing my net worth and building my career this entire time. The only thing that changed tonight is your perception. My mother stepped forward. Isabel, please. We made mistakes. We didn't understand. You didn't try to understand. There's a difference. I softened my voice slightly. Look, I love you both. You're my family. But tonight made it very clear that your love and respect has always been conditional on me fitting into your idea of what success looks like. That's not true, Nora protested. Isn't it? 20 minutes ago you were telling potential business partners that I was unemployed and delusional. You were suggesting they shouldn't trust anything I told them about my experience. You were actively trying to sabotage my professional reputation because you assumed I was pretending to be something I'm not. Nora's face crumpled. I didn't know. I thought you were. I thought you were trying to impress them with money you didn't have. I thought I was protecting them from being taken advantage of. You thought I was a con artist. No. I thought you were in over your head and too proud to admit it. I studied her face and saw that she was genuinely distressed. My mother looked like she was about to cry. Here's what's going to happen, I said finally. I'm going to finish my business meeting. You're welcome to stay, have dinner, explore the hotel. Talk to the staff, look around, get a real sense of what I've built here. But when we talk next, I want you to really think about how you've treated me and why. Isabel, my mother said quietly, I'm so sorry. I know I haven't been supportive. I know I've been critical. But I love you, and I want to make this right. I love you too, Mom. But love isn't enough if it doesn't come with respect. And respect isn't something you only give when someone proves themselves worthy by your standards. I started toward the elevators again, then paused and turned back. Oh, and Nora? That comment about this place being too expensive for failures like me? The penthouse suite you're standing under rents for $3,500 a night. I could afford to stay here every night for the rest of my life and not notice the expense. But I don't need to, because I live in the owner's apartment on the top floor. As the elevator doors closed, I could see Nora and my mother standing in the lobby, looking around with completely new eyes at what their failure of a daughter and sister had accomplished. The business meeting went perfectly. The investors were even more impressed after witnessing what they called my grace under pressure and my ability to handle family drama while maintaining professionalism. We signed preliminary agreements for the 3-hotel expansion, with full contracts to be finalized within the month. But the real victory wasn't the business deal, as satisfying as that was. The real victory was finally standing up for myself and my accomplishments after years of accepting my family's dismissive treatment. When I got back to my apartment 3 hours later, I had 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, mostly from Nora and my mother. The messages ranged from apologies to pleas to questions about my business to expressions of amazement about the hotel. I didn't respond to any of them that night. I poured myself a glass of wine, stood on my private balcony overlooking the city, and thought about how dramatically my life had changed in the space of a few hours. The next morning, Nora showed up at my office. My assistant buzzed me to say that my sister was in the lobby asking to speak with me, and against my better judgment, I agreed to see her. She walked into my office, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline, and just stood there for a moment, taking it all in. "This is really your office," she said finally. "Yes, Nora. This is really my office." She sat down across from my desk and burst into tears. "I'm so sorry, Isabel. I'm so incredibly sorry. I had no idea what you'd accomplished, and even if you hadn't accomplished anything, I had no right to treat you the way I did." I handed her the box of tissues I keep on my desk for emotional meetings with investors and business partners. "What I don't understand," she continued, "is why you never told us. Why did you let us think you were struggling?" "I never let you think anything," I said. "You made assumptions, and when I tried to correct them or share what I was actually doing, you dismiss it or change the subject. But you could have insisted. You could have made us listen. Why should I have had to? Why was it my responsibility to force you to respect me and my choices?" Nora was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. It was our responsibility to support you and be interested in your life, regardless of whether we understood it or approved of it." "Yes, it was. I've been thinking all night about the things I said to you over the years. The comments about finding stability, about getting a real job, about settling down. I thought I was being helpful, but I was actually being horrible." I waited for her to continue. "And last night, when I saw you in that suit in that beautiful hotel, my first instinct wasn't to be happy for you or proud of you. It was to tear you down because I couldn't handle the idea that you might actually belong there when I didn't." That was probably the most honest thing Nora had ever said to me. "I think," she said slowly, "I've been jealous of you for years, and I covered it up by being condescending and critical." "Jealous of what?" "Your courage. Your independence. The way you've always been willing to take risks and chase what you wanted instead of just accepting what was expected of you." I leaned back in my chair. "Nora, you have a good life. You have a career you enjoy, a husband who loves you, 2 beautiful kids. There's nothing wrong with the choices you made. I know that. But there's also nothing wrong with the choices you made, and I've spent years acting like there was." She wiped her eyes. "I want to make this right, Isabel. I want to be the sister you deserve." "It's not going to be easy," I said honestly. "This isn't just about last night. This is about years of feeling like I wasn't good enough for my own family unless I lived my life exactly the way you thought I should. I know. And I know I can't fix years of damage with one apology. But I want to try." We talked for 2 more hours. Nora asked questions about my business that she'd never bothered to ask before. She wanted to understand the timeline, the challenges, the victories. She asked about my plans for expansion, my vision for the hospitality group, my thoughts on the industry. For the first time in years, she listened to my answers without judgment or condescension. "I have one more question," she said as she was getting ready to leave. "What's that?" "The suite you mentioned last night, the $3,500 one. Could I see it sometime? I'd love to understand what you've created here." I smiled. "Actually, I have a better idea. Why don't you and David and the kids come stay for a weekend? I'll comp you the family suite. It has 2 bedrooms, and there's a kids' area with games and activities." Nora's face lit up. "You'd really do that? You're my sister, Nora. Despite everything, I love you. And I'd like the chance to show you what I've built here." She hugged me before she left, and for the first time in years, it felt genuine. My mother was harder to forgive. Her apology came in the form of a 10-page letter that arrived 2 days later, handwritten on her best stationery. She acknowledged every cutting comment, every dismissive remark, every time she'd compared me favorably to Nora. She admitted that she'd been so focused on her vision of what my life should look like that she'd completely missed what my life actually was. The letter was raw and honest, and by the time I finished reading it, I was crying. But forgiveness is a process, not an event. It took several more conversations, and a long weekend where my mother came to stay at the hotel and really saw what I'd accomplished, before we started to rebuild our relationship. The thing that surprised me most was how the staff reacted to all of this. Word had gotten around about what happened that night in the lobby, and for the next few weeks, everyone from housekeeping to the concierge team went out of their way to tell me how proud they were to work for me and how impressed they were with how I'd handled the situation. Marcus, my security chief, pulled me aside a week later to say that in all his years in security, he'd never seen someone maintain that level of professionalism while being personally attacked. "You didn't let them get to you," he said. "You didn't lose your temper or say anything you'd regret later. You just stated the facts and let them speak for themselves." The investors followed through on everything they'd promised. The contracts were signed within 3 weeks, and we're breaking ground on the second hotel in 18 months. The expansion is going to make Grandview Hospitality Group one of the major players in boutique luxury hospitality. But the real change has been in my family relationships. Nora and I now talk regularly, and our conversations are completely different. She asks about my work with genuine interest and enthusiasm. She's brought David and the kids to stay at the hotel twice, and watching my niece and nephew explore the property I built has been one of the most satisfying experiences of my life. My mother has become one of my biggest champions. She's told everyone in her social circle about Isabel's hotel, and she's brought 3 different groups of friends to stay here. She asks detailed questions about occupancy rates and profit margins, and she started reading hospitality industry publications so she can better understand my business.